Hello, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Little Africa Bronx News's first Civil Court Judicial Candidates Forum. My name is Mymoena Davids, and I will be co-hosting this evening's forum with Mr. Walli Ullah.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Walli Ullah, and I'm a resident of Pelham Gardens in the Bronx. I'm here today representing Bronx Community Council and the Muslim Immigrant Coalition for Justice, and I'm co-hosting this forum alongside Mymoena Davids.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mona Davids. I am the founder and publisher of Little Africa Bronx News. Little Africa Bronx News is a project of social impact strategies, which is a Black-owned, immigrant-owned political and communications consultancy. We are based in the Bronx, actually District 12, Co-op City. And I'd like to thank all of our candidates for honoring us and joining us this evening for this very important forum. As part of Little Africa Bronx News's political and civic engagement initiatives, we began interviewing candidates for city council, Bronx city council races, as well as mayoral races, and we will be interviewing candidates for the comptroller and the public advocates race. The reason we are doing this is because we believe it is important that voters understand who is running to represent them, what their background is, as well as their experience. We also began conducting candidate forums a couple of months ago, and that's why we're very happy to host the Bronx's first civil court judge candidates forum. And for our viewers, we always think about our elected officials, but we really don't pay attention, and many of us are unaware that when it comes to the judges, one of the ways for someone to become a judge is to be elected. And these are people who, make serious decisions and come down with rulings that affect us. And you'll learn more about it when Walli Ullah does his presentation. Joining us today as well, who I'd like to introduce to you is one of our event supporters, and that is Mr. Sadio Barry, who is the president of the Senegalese Association in America. Mr. Barry, if you could please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Mona. Good evening, everybody. My name is Sadio Barry. I am the president of the Senegalese Association of America. I would like to thank everybody and to thank also Little Africa Bronx News to give me the opportunity to participate in this forum that I find is a very, very important forum. As immigrant, as a leader, we really concerned about those decisions the judge take it from the court. That's why I'm here tonight to speak with you. Again, I welcome everybody. Thank you.
So my new role tonight, which I take very seriously, and I hope I do a good job on, is I am going to be the timekeeper. So Mymoena is going to go over the run of show, but as timekeeper, depending on how many minutes are allocated for you to answer a question, when you have 30 seconds left, I'm going to do this, right, Mona? I'm sorry, it's new to me. You have 30 seconds.
I've been the timekeeper for our mayoral candidate forum and our Bronx borough president forum. So she's taking on a new position today. Yes, you will raise a 3 when you have 30 seconds left of your allocated time. And then when the ringer goes off, she will simply raise a T to show time out, and where you will, stop.
So, with that being said, I'm gonna prepare myself and pass it over to Mymoena and Walli to go over the rest of the run of show.
Okay. So for all of our viewers, I'm just going to give you a run of show so you know what is going on logistically. Before we start the questioning portion of our evening, we are going to begin with a civil court explained presentation that'll be given by Walli, just to give everyone a little bit of information on The civil court, what it abides over and what these judges would be doing if they were to receive the seat. After the presentation, we will do candidate introductions, in which each candidate will be given 2 minutes to introduce themselves and state why they are running for civil court judge. After their introductions, we will go into the questioning portion, where candidates will be asked questions on a variety of different topics. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to answer the question. At the 30-second mark, Mona will give you a 30-second warning and then a time up when your time is done. Questions will be asked in alphabetical and then reverse alphabetical order, and we will always state who is going to answer after each other, each question. After the questioning portion is over, candidates will give their closing remarks, and each candidate will have 1 minute to state why Bronxites should vote for them. And then we will have general forum closing remarks by the hosts.
All right, now we can proceed with the presentation regarding civil court. Let me share my screen. Can everyone see it? Okay, civil court explained. Here's some fast facts in regards to civil court and how it works. So civil court judges are, elected positions. They serve 10-year terms, unless if they're promoted by the chief administrative judge of New York to Supreme Court. Otherwise, they would serve 14-year terms. There are roughly 120 civil court judges and 50 housing court judges in the New York City Civil Court. And based on judicial need, the chief administrative judge of New York can assign civil court judges to the criminal court, family court, or Supreme Court. And only 50 civil court judges are assigned to civil court, while the remainder are assigned to criminal, family, or Supreme Court. And housing court judges remain in civil court, handling the housing parts of the New York City court, and they cannot be reassigned to other courts, unlike other civil court judges. All right. So this is the role in the jurisdiction of the New York City Civil Court. The New York City Civil Court presides over 3 types of cases: general civil, housing, and small claims. General civil cases are cases in which parties are seeking monetary relief of up to $25,000, including commercial landlord-tenant cases, consumer debt cases, name change cases, because you need court approval to get your name legally changed, and no-fault cases, which refer to cases involving automobile accidents. Housing cases are those in regards to residential landlord-tenant matters and maintenance of housing standards, and these extend to non-payment cases, holdover cases, which are cases in which a landlord wants to evict a tenant or anyone that's residing in the premises for reasons other than non-payment, such as their failure to abide by any provisions of their lease. HB cases are cases regarding seeking of repairs. Then there are harassment cases, and there are Article 7A cases in which 1/3 of a residential building, they are seeking to, the tenants that are, they are seeking for the court to appoint an administrator to run the building instead of the owner, if the owner, doesn't, provide reasonable enough living standards for tenants, and their illegal lockout cases. Small claims cases are cases in which involved parties are seeking monetary relief of $10,000 or less. And next slide. So the 3 types of civil court judges, given that civil court judges can either be assigned to criminal court or family court, it's important to understand each of their functions. Civil court judges, they, as I mentioned earlier, preside over cases pertaining to commercial leases, consumer debt, legal name change applications, and automobile accident insurance claims, in addition to housing cases. In criminal court, judges preside over cases regarding misdemeanors, conduct arraignments, bail setting, and sentencing. And they can also issue warrants for search and arrest. Family court judges preside over cases regarding parental rights, child custody, and domestic violence, and they can also issue orders of protection and juvenile sentencing. Now, this is, a bit of us explainer on how the electoral process works when it comes to, judicial races. Um, there are currently 19 vacancies for judge of the Civil Court of New York City, 2 of which are in the Bronx and being held for the 2nd District. In order to qualify for the respective political party's nomination, candidates for civil court must collect and file 4,000 petition signatures if they're running for a countywide seat and 1,500 petition signatures for a district seat. So both of the vacancies that are undergoing this race right now, they are district specifics. So that means the candidates that are running need to collect 1,500 petition signatures. In each election year, the New York Bar Association's Committee on the Judiciary evaluates and designates approval or non-approval status to judicial candidates based on their qualifications necessary for performance of the duties of the position. And even though judicial candidates can still run for election without New York Bar Association approval, it still serves as an indicator of the candidate's qualifications for the position. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Thank you so much for that. So now we are going to begin with the candidate introductions. As previously stated, each candidate will have 2 minutes to introduce themselves. So we are going to go in alphabetical order. So that'll be Cruz, Flores, Gonzalez-Taylor, and Powell. Your time will begin when you begin speaking.
So I want to thank you. I'm just so honored to be a candidate for a civil court judge. That in of itself is an honor, right? You should know, and I'm talking to the electorate, that there are 2 people, well, there are 2 seats and 5 people running for those seats. And it's important that we have a discussion about criminal justice reform, especially when we're talking about who the mayor is going to be and the city council, right? And with that comes the opportunity for the electorate to decide for themselves, by extension, who should be the judge. Let me tell you why I'm running, right? And it's important that you understand, I believe my candidacy presents Bronx Democrats with the unique opportunity to promote one of their own, to promote all that is good in our system, and to provide concrete examples of restorative justice and redemption, right? So I was born in the Bronx, raised when the Bronx was burning. I realized in a very personal way how important the courts are in protecting individual rights and how redemption plays an important role in justice, right? Who's the judge matters. And Bronx Democrats should be on the right side of history when we're talking about that, right? So why am I running? I'm running to fill the gap in the inequity of justice. I'm running to have a judiciary that's more fair. I'm running to provide the electorate with a choice so they can decide for themselves who would best serve as judge. I'm running to promote what is good in our system. I believe that this election cycle is an important one in that we've never in the history of Bronx County, as modern history, so at least 30 years, as long as I know, right, have had 5 candidates running for a judicial seat. It's normally a very sleepy discussion because the limitations that are on our judicial candidates and our ability to articulate what and how we'll dispense justice in the future, right? I see there's a signal coming up. They only have what, 3 seconds or 30 seconds? I don't know what that is, but I'm running for judge. And ultimately, I believe that in the end, when you have an opportunity to speak to me, a vote for Cruz for judge is a vote for transformative change. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cruz. Now we go to Ms. Flores.
Thank you, everyone. Good evening, and it's really nice to see all the candidates. I'm familiar with Angel Cruz and Yadhira Gonzalez-Taylor, and I'm meeting Verena Powell for the first time. What a pleasure. So let me tell you a little about myself and why I'm running. Education background, I went to Rutgers University, Hofstra Law School. I'm admitted to practice bar in the state of New York and New Jersey, in the Eastern District and the Southern District of New York, which are federal courts. I began my career in law by representing children and families. In particular, in law school, I began representing children who were abused and neglected. From there, I went on and I went to work for ACS, the New York City Administration for Children's Services. After several years there, I decided I needed to do more. I wasn't doing enough, and I needed to help my community a little bit more. And so I decided to jump over to the other side, and I became what is called an 18B attorney, which is an assigned counsel attorney within family court. I represented children as well as families. With that, I was able to also take on cases that were private cases. I would do child custody, visitations, orders of protections. I would do divorces in Supreme Court, as well as mental hygiene cases where I represented the incapacitated. Through my history as an 18B attorney and my dedication to helping those that were indigent, I saw a disproportion. I saw the signal, thank you. I saw a disproportion in the courts. There weren't enough judges that looked like me. I saw that the judges that were on the bench did not understand what the litigants before them were bringing forth and all their issues. And that's why I decided I wanted to run. I understand our community. I am them. I can do a much better job than where there is a disconnect in the bench and the litigants that are going before them. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now we move on to Ms. Gonzalez-Taylor. You are muted.
And I tonight with the muting problem. Hi, everyone. My name is Yadhira Gonzalez-Taylor. Thank you, Mymoena. Thank you, Walli. And thank you, Mona and sponsors for hosting this tonight. As a civic advocate, I believe that an informed electorate is a powerful electorate. And I am running because I want people to know that there are choices for judges in Bronx County. I am honored to be here today. I am running to bring compassion and lived experience to the bench. I am what you would call Bronx born, raised, and shaped. I'm educated in all the public schools in the Bronx along the aqueduct, such as 91, IS 206B, and IS 137 on Webster. But for the times that I spent in Puerto Rico with my grandparents in Caguas, most of that education I received here in Bronx County. I'm a graduate of CUNY. I have a BS and an MA from John Jay College of Criminal Justice, and I attended law school at New York Law School while married to a New York City firefighter who was working all sorts of odd hours, and while we were raising two young children, two of which today are adults. One is a teacher in a charter school in the South Bronx, and the other one is a student of nursing at a local CUNY school. I began my public service and national service to the country as a military police officer in the Army during peacetime. So I'm what you would call a peacetime soldier. During law school, I interned at the U.S. Attorney's Office, Brooklyn DA, Bronx DA, and I worked as a paralegal at the Bronx District Attorney's Office, again, while raising my children and supporting my husband, who was a New York City firefighter. After that, I was hired by the Honorable Robert T. Johnson to be an assistant DA at entry level. I was active in moot court, and I moved on from there, from doing various financial crime cases to the NYPD, where I did corruption and misconduct cases. And for the last 12 years, I have been a hearing officer with the Department of Education, dealing with procedural hearings regarding serious infractions such as violence, sexual assaults, and things that put the well-being of our students in danger. I cover incidents happening in Manhattan, and I've presided over 1,500 complex cases involving families and students. I also arbitrated over 50 arbitrations in small claims court over the last 2 years until the pandemic shut down the civil court system. And I am a professor at Monroe. I'm a daughter of the Bronx, and I'm running because my lived experience, which we will hopefully get a little bit much into as we discuss why we're running and what is important about being judges, will come to light. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we move on to Ms. Powell.
Okay, good evening. My name is Verena Powell, and even though I have not had the opportunity to be born and raised or educated in Bronx, New York, I've now been in Bronx, New York, or actually in New York, period, more than half my life. After I finished law school at Boston University, I worked very briefly for a corporate firm, but it really didn't sit right with my soul, because the first job I ever had was actually as a Harvard defender. Even though I went to Boston University School of Law, I did the program at Harvard University's Law School, defending people in the district courts of Boston, basically misdemeanor courts under their student practice law. After coming to New York, I actually interviewed with a number of defense attorneys. All the defense attorneys I interviewed with were former prosecutors, and they thought that the best training to receive was in the district attorney's office. I entered December of 1988, technically under Paul Gentile, but Robert Johnson sat in on all the final interviews at that point in time. I had the honor of working for him. I represented him at Community Board number 2 as a liaison, as well as the fact that I was part of the homicide mob squad, which meant that I tried homicide cases. I tried individuals who had very rough records, as well as the fact that I supervised other individuals who were on daily beeper duty. After that point in time, I went to private practice. I did primarily criminal defense, but also because I had a background in labor and employment law, I sat as a Step 2 grievance officer for Health and Hospitals Corporation. During the time that I've been in private practice, I've had an opportunity to represent a variety of people in the family courts, in the civil courts, and in the criminal courts of New York City, not just Bronx, but Brooklyn, Queens, Staten Island, and even upstate New York. I think that my life and my experience is one of service, whether it's in the courts, whether it's in the community, or whether it's within religious institutions and the like. I want to run for judge and to represent the people of the Bronx because I am a person of the Bronx. I have lived here for 15 years. I'm a homeowner, and I think that I can do the job and represent the interests of the community and be inclusive of everyone in the Bronx community.
Thank you so much. Now that we have heard all of the candidates' introductions, we will go to our event sponsor, Mr. Sadio Berry, for him to begin the questioning portion with his own questions.
Thank you again. Here my question. I have 2 questions for you guys.
Mr. Barry, your video is off.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Mymoena. I'm on now?
Yes, we can see you.
Thank you. I'm sorry about it. All right, guys. First of all, I would like to wish you good luck for the election, for all of you. And thank you for your determination and motivation to run for this position in the matter to assist and help the community, especially the people. As a parent and as a leader, a nonprofit organization leader, we do have most of the time that kind of person coming in our community saying that we understand that you're running for civil court judge. And for sure, in the future, if you need it to transfer to the family court, that's family court concern us a lot. Meaning, the first question is, I'm asking that question because of my experience in the community. People struggle a lot about it. They don't understand how and why the judge can decide this way. But I think tonight is my opportunity to find the answer from you guys. Then maybe tomorrow or next week, if I meet my people, I can explain to them why those decisions come to the judge. The first one is, will gender affect your decision when deciding child custody cases? How would you determine the best interest of the child? The second one is, have any of you practiced family law? If you have, could you explain how child support is determined? Thank you.
Okay, and to begin the questioning, since we did candidate introductions in alphabetical order, we're going to do reverse alphabetical order. So Ms. Powell, you'd be the first to answer.
Okay, please give me 1 second. For some reason, my computer's acting a little crazy.
Of course.
Okay. First of all, Mr. Barry, yes, I've practiced family law in New York City. I've represented individuals in Brooklyn, New York County, Bronx County, as well as Queens. I don't think gender should come into consideration when you're raising your own child. I know some people think that only a father can raise a son and only a mother can raise a daughter. But I think obviously, as long as that parent has the skills and the ability to raise that child in a healthy environment, emotionally, psychologically, and everything else, I think that that should be taken into consideration. And I believe most judges do take that into consideration. In reference to child support, that is set by law. It's based on a percentage of the parent's income, basically the non-custodial parent. So the decisions are based on how much the person makes, as well as how many children that particular individual has who are under a support order from the family court.
Thank you. Now we will go to Ms. Gonzalez-Taylor.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Barry, for that question. I have not practiced family law. However, I have been in the DOE system for 11 years, so I deal with acts done by students anywhere from 3rd grade through 12th grade and beyond, because the school system allows you to go to school through 21 years old, who have done violent acts or what would be considered delinquent acts in the Family Court Act. Gender should never, ever be a basis for decision in parenting under any circumstance. We are living in a world where we are all accepted for who we are and how we're born. We are living in a world where we're learning to speak to people based on their preferred pronouns. So gender should never be a determinant. As a family court judge, I would not look at whether a mother or father could be any better parent. I myself lived with 2 grandparents, which is a non-traditional family. So the definition of parent is not gender-based, it's based on the loving care that an adult person can provide a child, whether they can provide clothing, food, and shelter, which is what the law requires. And in terms of child custody support orders, that is something that is handled by support magistrates, as far as I'm aware, under the supervision of a family court judge.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next will be Ms. Flores.
Of course, I'm on mute. I probably will do that a couple times. So I, yes, have practiced in family court. That has been the foundation of my entire career. So I do not think that gender plays a role. I have represented mothers seeking custody as well as fathers seeking custody. I have also represented both gay males and lesbians who also seek to have custody. And I do not think that gender plays any role. It really boils down to, like you said, the best interest. What is best interest, right? So what the courts look at are several factors and I really probably wouldn't be able to list them all, but we're looking at the age of the child. So the best interest of the child at the age of 5 could be a little bit different than a 10-year-old, and definitely a lot different than incomes of the parents, their schooling, the children's schooling, their rearing as far as education and religion. And there are just so many factors that a judge has to take into when determining best interests, right? So, and then there are more severe issues with best interests where there could be domestic violence in the home, and the judge needs to make the proper determination there, what would be the best interest for that child. As far as child support is determined by a percentage, and it is the percentage of a combined income, right? So the goal of child support is to allow the child to live financially the way they would if the parents were a unit, were intact, right? So you wouldn't be in a child support case if you were a unit. You're there because your parents are separated. So if your parents were together and they made X amount of money, then that is what the courts look at. Let's combine both incomes and take the percentage. In New York, for one child would be 17%, right? And so then the non-custodial parent would be the one to pay the custodial parent whatever the determination is on the income. And I hope that answered your question.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Flores. Now we move to Mr. Cruz.
Well, thank you. I have practiced family law. Having an office on 161st exposes me to many of the problems of, people in the Bronx traditionally next to the courthouse. They look for lawyers right next to there, right? So the point is, child support, statutory. We don't need to have a long discussion about that. The numbers dictate the outcome there. With regards to your other question, if elected judge, I can guarantee all that come before us or before me that I'm going to dispense justice without bias or favor, and that includes a blindness to gender. So thank you.
All right, Mr. Barry, do you have another question?
Yes, what I would like to add, if it's possible, is according to the percentage, people saying that more than 50 or 60% of cases, women are taking opportunity, meaning the judge at the woman's side. Is that true or no? When it comes to the child support, yeah.
So we will be going in alphabetical order. So Mr. Cruz.
Well, those are anecdotal situations that ultimately, me as a judicial candidate, I cannot tell you. I can only tell you that if you vote for me, you're going to get a judge that's fair and is going to dispense justice without bias or favor. I mean, that's the extent of how I would address that. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, now we move to Ms. Flores.
So again, child support is a calculation based on a formula, right? So there cannot be favoritism for one side to the other. So before you get to child support and you determine what that amount's going to be, a judge has already determined who the custodial parent is. You can't calculate the child support until you know who is the non-custodial parent and who's the custodial parent, right? So that's already laid out. When you get to the child support, you're providing the magistrate your financial information, whether they be W-2s, your taxes. If you're, say, a taxi cab driver, you're providing whatever receipts you have. If you're a 1099 employee, you're providing the magistrate your 1099 records. So the magistrate doesn't look at who's female, who's the male. The magistrate's not looking at who's making more money, who's making less money. They're not looking at that. They have a formula to follow. There are numbers that get plugged in to a calculation that they have. They have a system where they can calculate. And I think if you Google how to calculate New York State child support, there are some resources out there, not by the court, but by other attorneys that have used some kind of independent calculator so that you can plug in and have more or less an idea of where you're going to fall. It'll ask you who's the non-custodial parent, it'll ask you who's the custodial parent, it'll ask you what the incomes are and how many children there are. And then you can get more or less a better determination as to where the support magistrate will make his or her ruling once you go into court. So it's not about favoring one side or the other. It's really a formulaic computation.
Thank you, Ms. Flores. Now we move to Ms. Gonzalez-Taylor.
Mr. Barry, if I understand your question, are you saying, and if you could just clarify, so maybe I can give you a little bit more of an insight. Are you saying that women use the system against their spouses, or are you saying that they are getting an advantage over child support?
No, what I mean is when they go to they're going to the court, when it comes to child support, women get more opportunity from the judge, meaning any decision from the judge go to the woman's side, and people, they worry about this kind of decision.
Okay, so then you're worried, the decision, the concern of the community is what kind of judge we want on the bench. A judge who is going to side with a woman because it's a woman, or a judge who's going to look at both sides and read through, you know, people do lie. I've been doing fact finding for 11 years. I sit in hearings and people lie. Teachers lie, school safety officers lie, students lie, adults lie. So fact finding is a particular skill. You have to be able to read body language. You have to be able to follow up with questions when you hear inconsistencies from individuals that are appearing before you. That is not a skill that anybody is born with. That is something that you develop from years of experience. That is grand jury presentations as a DA. Hearings, multiple hearings at the NYPD where I had to cross-examine corrupt officers that were accused of doing horrible things in the New York City Police Department. 11 years of cross-examining people who come and accuse students of doing awful things in the school system. That is the skill that you're looking for. You're looking for lawyers who want to be judges who have been doing this for quite some time. Not necessarily in any field, but the ability to be able to question people and find out, kind of like go through the muck and find out who's telling the truth. Because everyone has the potential to lie, especially when it comes to money. People are willing to say whatever it takes when it means that their financial security is at stake. So in terms of looking for a judge who you think is not going to be caring about gender so much, but caring about the integrity of the story that is being told to them and the integrity of what is told to the magistrate who is doing the child support hearings. That is what I would put forward. Anecdotes we can't go by because we would have to do a whole study on the family court system to figure out if this is true.
Thank you.
And now, last but not least, Ms. Powell.
Again, Mr. Barry, a judge in this particular situation is supposed to take in all the facts and circumstances. They're supposed to listen to the individuals, whether represented by counsel or whether they are self-represented. As has been mentioned before, there is financial affidavits that the individual has to bring to court, showing his or her financial situation of their current household, as well as, let's say, if the couple had actually been a couple and had one household, what it was like before. Also, as has been previously said, you do have to take the time and the effort to listen to both sides. You have to listen to what is being said, both on direct examination as well as cross-examination, because sometimes the truth is in between. There are some times where people are not being truthful. There's other times when people may not realize that things that they're saying or not saying are as important with coming to that decision. But no, there should be no judge on the bench who's going to take anyone's particular side based on their gender, based on their nationality, based on what they do for a living.
Thank you, Ms. Powell. Thank you, Mr. Barry, for your questions, kicking off our forum. Really appreciate having you here. So now we will begin the rest of the questioning portion, beginning with Walli asking our first question. But just before he starts, I want to say to all of our viewers on the Zoom and on the Facebook live stream that these judicial candidates have a very strict code of ethics in regards to what they are allowed to speak upon and not. So for anyone posting questions in the chat or commenting on the live stream, they are not allowed to comment on any current cases or pending litigation, and they are also not permitted to comment on controversial issues. So I just wanted to put that out there for people who might be asking questions on the Facebook live stream, just so that you know that the questions that we are asking have been vetted. All right, and Mr. Walli, Mr. Ullah.
All right, so there are three general topics that we'll be asking questions on. The first will be general, second will be housing, and third will be law and justice. And for the general section, we'll be going in alphabetical order. For housing, reverse alphabetical, and law and justice, alphabetical again. So the first person to answer this question will be Mr. Cruz, then Miss Flores, then Miss Gonzalez-Taylor, and then Miss Powell. So our first question is, many of our audience members who are citywide voters aren't as familiar with judicial candidates as with other types of political candidates. We have now heard your introductions and backgrounds. Now our question is, what uniquely qualifies you for the position of civil court judge? Mr. Cruz.
Well, thank you. I am uniquely qualified because I have a lived experience. Early on, my life experiences have made me acutely aware of the gap in justice and the inequities from the bench. I, back in '93, actually stood before a judge and asked him to have enough faith in his own sense of character to allow me an opportunity. And that measure of grace that he bestowed upon me changed my life. So from there, I've been on a march to justice ever since. I came back to the Bronx, where I was born, got married, raised my children. Ultimately, I too have a daughter that works in the school system. My son is graduating John Jay. I'm a graduate of John Jay. My wife's a graduate of John Jay. I'm a graduate of CUNY School of Law. Upon graduation, was hired as a court attorney to research and write decisions and dispense justice, or aid in the dispensing of justice in a way that's consistent with the values of our community. So what uniquely qualifies me for the bench, it's not only that I've worked as a court attorney, not only that I stood before the bench and argued for the release of so many of my clients, but also that I have felt the inequities, if you will. It's a lived experience. One, law came to me by way of necessity. And having lived that experience, there's no way in which, another judge really can see it other than through your own experience, right? So from my perspective, it's important that we elect judges that are not only from this community, that are not only diversifying the bench by gender, but diversifying the bench by that lived experience, right? And seeing the underbelly of our society as I did uniquely qualifies me to be a judge, and ultimately to do just that. So I ask the electorate to vote for Cruz. Thank you.
Okay, great. What makes me unique? So my work history, first and foremost, right? I've worked in family court for many, many, many years. I volunteered in small claims court, which is a preparation for what I will face when I become a civil court judge. I now work for a Supreme Court justice, who in fact Angel worked for as well. And I have done not just family court stuff and Article 81 cases, the mental hygiene cases that I have spoken about, but I've done labor law, products liability, malpractice cases. My education has come from hostile law. I'm fully prepared. I have a diverse portfolio of types of cases that I have worked on top of just on the trial levels. I've also worked on the appellate level. I have argued before the appellate court. I have prepared appellate briefs. Now, as lived experience, I think Angel is talking about something that's key for all of us. Our lived experiences are what makes us unique, okay? I am a mother. I am first generation. My mother is from Cuba, my father is from Honduras. And not only a mother, but I am a mother to a special needs child. My son was born with an extra chromosome. So I've gone through a lot of experiences that a lot of parents in the Bronx community have gone through that no one really talks about when we talk about mental health. I have a stepson who is an NYPD officer. I have a stepdaughter who is biracial. She's Dominican and Black. And my husband, of course, being Dominican. Those are my lived experiences. This is what I bring to the table. And this is what makes me unique. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that there is no question that each and every one of us here and the fifth candidate who is missing meets the minimum qualifications, which is the 10 years. I actually know two of the candidates that are here as well. I just met Ms. Powell, but I have heard of her. She's a former prosecutor from the same office where I served. So when it comes down to seeing who will be the best candidate or who will best serve the community, there has to be a look into the background, the lived experience, which is, like Mr. Cruz says, gives you a look into the underbelly of the beast, right? My first experience of family court is 16 years old, sitting in a complaint room with my mother while she has a big cheek bruise, and the typist didn't even look us in the eye. The judge didn't even look my mother in the eye when she asked for an order of protection. We left there feeling more shame than we did coming in from being victims of violence from my father. My first experience of visiting my father is at Dina Mora Clinton facility. 14 hours away by bus, I would travel as a little kid with my mom to go visit my dad. So I have those experiences, and I have the experience of a kid growing up on 181st and Davidson in 1982, seeing a sex worker service somebody behind my building. That is something that you cannot learn in a book, ever. But what that gave me was resilience, striving to succeed, but never forgetting where I come from. I will never be ashamed of saying that I come from a very poor place, and that I come from a place in Puerto Rico that people look down on because most people are of low socioeconomic means. I'm Puerto Rican, married to a Haitian man who was born in the Bahamas, and I have 3 biracial children. Identity in terms of race and gender really is something that is covered here completely. So that really should not be a deciding factor for anyone at this point. It really should boil down to qualification and experience. Thank you.
Well, I believe that I'm uniquely qualified for this position because I've worked on both sides of the aisle. I've been a prosecutor and I've been a defense attorney twice as long. I've worked in civil, I've worked in criminal. I have been in administrative law, I have been in family law, I have been in civil law, I've been in corporate law. So it's fair to say that I have, I guess, a wide variety of experiences within the courtroom. I've been fortunate to supervise others. As I stated before, when I was a prosecutor, I had received homicide mob status, which Ms. Gonzalez-Taylor understands, which means, as I said, I tried very serious cases. But even so, even if I was a prosecutor, I looked at the individuals who were on the other side who I was prosecuting as people of the state of New York too. It was just not the so-called people in the box or the people in the audience. The defendant is also a member of the state of New York and a person who is to be treated with respect. I believe, especially at that point in time and still do, that just because you're accused of a crime, you should still receive all your constitutional rights. Also, in reference to being a supervisor, in my current position, I supervise 700 attorneys between Manhattan and Bronx, individuals who represent criminal defendants in the courts of New York, be it criminal court or be it Supreme Court. I've also had the opportunity to serve as a teacher as well as a mentor. I've been part of the Cardozo Law School trial advocacy program for a number of years, even though I haven't been there within the past year or so. Also, I've served for the Asian American Bar Association of New York and participated as an instructor in some of their CLE programs. Also, as part of my current responsibilities, I'm responsible for putting together continuing legal education programs for the 700 attorneys of the first department, and I work with a co-partner who has another 400 or 500 attorneys in the second department. And we have to make sure that they're ready to appear in court, have the resources to represent their clients to the best of their ability. And I keep talking about trial attorneys. I was a trial attorney. I've tried close to 100 cases in my career, and I had a pretty good success rate. So I think, even though I'm not from New York like everyone else, I guess my connection is, other than living here, my husband is a New Yorker, born and bred, and he's of Puerto Rican descent. So I am a New Yorker. So I do think I'm qualified. I know I have the experience, and I know I would do what's best for the people who are in front of me.
Thank you. Now moving on to our next question. Understanding that judges are obligated to follow law and act impartially, in what ways do you believe prior experiences, primarily in civil litigation or as a prosecutor or defense attorney, how that affects the performance of judicial duties in criminal cases and civil cases? And we'll be going in reverse order now. So Ms. Powell, you're the first.
I think, when you first become a prosecutor or a defense attorney, I think that you think that your side is the good guys and the other side are the bad guys. I think when I realized everything is more gray and nothing is black and white, is the first time I had a witness who was not forthright about what had happened. And needless to say, at the time I found out, it was devastating, but at the same time, it opened my eyes. In reference to police officers, I've never really had a background where I dealt with them before becoming a prosecutor. So it's just like anything else. You take people at face value until they do something to disappoint you or something to take away the fact that you don't believe that they're being truthful. And I think that matters whether you're a prosecutor or a defense attorney, whether you're in civil or criminal. What criminal defense attorneys always say, or even criminal prosecutors, that the most civil practice there is actually a criminal practice, because people who fight over money, that can be very negative. People are willing to be dishonest. People are willing not to come forward with what they know in that particular circumstance. I think that my experiences both in civil court and criminal court has given me a good basis in making decisions about how people present themselves, how they present evidence, how they present facts, whether they're going to be truthful, and basically a person's demeanor as well as how they, I think, respond to questioning will let you know how that person is. And that pretty much forms my opinion of whether this person is being truthful in a particular situation.
Thank you. Next will be Ms. Gonzalez-Taylor.
Thank you. Okay, so I believe I'm the only candidate who's been doing judge work for 11 years. I'm not called a judge, I'm called a hearing officer, but I do quasi-judicial work full-time so that there are no misunderstandings, because there are part-time administrative law judges in the city. I am a full-time hearing officer for the city of New York for the Department of Education, and I do fact-finding every single day that I get a case in my job. These are based on acts that are done by students in the school system. The skill sets that I bring as a former prosecutor, both for the DA and the NYPD, are the ability to carry heavy caseloads. We start off right out of law school with 150 to 200 cases. We're working 13-hour days sometimes as prosecutors, 13 days straight with 2 days off, night complaint room, day complaint room. We do grand jury, we do examinations in the grand jury and presentations, and continuing, I was in the investigations bureau where I did financial crimes investigations and corruption investigations. And I also have the skill set that I bring from the NYPD experience, which was leading IAB investigators and CCRB investigators in how they looked at misconduct done by the police officers and the civilian members of the NYPD. I have 11 years of dealing with pro se people who come to my hearing room who don't have representation. And I have developed over those years a skill set which is the required patience to be able to help someone understand without crossing boundaries ethically, without giving them too much help, so that they can best represent themselves and give them the resources that they need so that they can live better lives. That is what I have to offer in terms of my legal experience of over 18 years as a lawyer, plus my interning as a law student. In addition to that, my national service as an MP. Having gone through basic training and 6 years of military service, I can tell you that I am not afraid of hard work. And the courts right now are devastated. They were shut down in 2020. And as of right now, we can ask the people who still work in the system if they're really up to 100% work. They're not. So which one of us gets elected better be someone who's willing to really roll up their sleeves and help clear these dockets, because there are people who are sitting in jail waiting for their day in court. Whoever gets elected needs to be sitting at that bench at 9 o'clock in the morning, dealing with the work, helping the people who are incarcerated so that they have their day in court. Remember, they're innocent until it's proven that they're guilty. We cannot have people living in Rikers Island waiting to have their criminal case heard. They are innocent until proven guilty. And in civil court, the same thing. Everything is backlogged. Small claims, as I'm aware, is still somewhat shut down. I know that I haven't been asked to come back to arbitrate. So I believe that that is still being backlogged. So hard work, and that work ethic, I bring it based on who I am. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will have Ms. Flores.
All right, great. So let me just start off by piggybacking on what Ms. Gonzalez-Taylor just said, Yadhira. So I think I'm the only one who's an OCA employee at the moment. And we haven't stopped work. We haven't stopped working since the pandemic started. Although we were asked to leave the courthouse on or about March 17th, I believe it was. We went back in full force on June 10th, and all judges and their staff have been in chambers working extremely hard. We haven't stopped. Yes, there may be a little bit of a backlog, but I can guarantee you that we are all working, and we are working very hard at what we do every day, whether from home or in the courthouse. That being said, it's a great segue for me to tell you about my experiences, right? So for almost the past 3 years, I have been a principal law clerk to a Supreme Court justice, where I not only do research and writing, legal research and writing for the judge, I also hear discovery disputes. And when there are discovery disputes, the attorneys are arguing between cases, and I, on behalf of the judge, would make rulings based on the CPL law, right? So by that, I have gained the experience, I have gained the knowledge of how to perform my duties when I become a judge. I will use a temperament that my judge, who has been an extremely, and Angel's shaking his head yes, because we've shared the same experience, has been a huge mentor in my life and has taught me and prepared me for my next step as I ascend to the bench. With life experiences, we need to then couple our education experiences, right? So with my life experiences, as a family court attorney previously, I understood situations that other judges did not understand. And I will continue to humanize every case. For example, if they decide to put me into, because OCA can put me into family court, as Walli discussed previously, I will use those life experiences of what it is to be a mother of a special needs child, what it is to be an first generation of immigrant parents in this country, and couple all that together. That is what I'm going to bring to the bench. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Cruz.
Wow, those are hard shoes to follow. So, you know, as I said earlier, I realized early on in life, in a very personal way, the power of the state and the ability to negotiate the law in a way that's consistent with the needs of our community, right? I think all of the candidates make an important point that post-COVID, the way we dispense justice has to be consistent with the needs of those that are deserving justice, right? And so if there's a candidate here that wants to be a judge because they think they're going to retire on the bench, it's not going to happen. The times have changed, how we dispense justice has changed. And I should say, right, so I started my legal career as someone who was accused of a crime, right? I've overcame that through the assistance and help of a community that ultimately had enough faith in their own sense of character that allowed me an opportunity to rejoin society and assume a position of trust. What type of judge am I going to be? Well, I stood before a judge and I asked that judge to have enough faith in his system to allow me a second chance. And he did that. And that small measure of grace changed in me a march. It created such a wonderful thing in me that ultimately I'm a benefactor of so much grace, right? So you ask, what type of judge am I going to be? Well, I'm going to be one that's going to dispense justice without bias or favor, but ultimately is going to not close his eyes to his own lived experience. Does that mean that everyone, well, let me strike. Let's back up. What was the original question?
The question was, sorry, I was looking ahead. How do your prior experiences, how do you think they will affect your performance of judicial duties in criminal and civil cases?
So thank you, right? So I've been a civil litigator, a criminal defense attorney. I've been a court attorney to a Supreme Court justice here in Bronx County, and also at the appellate term, First Department for like 7 years, where we were deciding very important cases, both civil and criminal. So I have the lived experience, I have the academic experience, and I think someone said earlier, we all have the necessary 10 years. I think we're all amply qualified. What distinguishes us is our lived experience. So in the end, vote for Cruz, because a vote for Cruz is a vote for change. And so ultimately, if you're looking for fairness, if you're looking for someone that's going to dispense justice without bias or favor, then you're going to vote for Angel Cruz for judge. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we'll proceed with the next question. What experience do you believe you possess that demonstrates your ability to relate to a cross-section of the public that might come before you? We'll start in alphabetical order again. Mr. Cruz?
Walli, can you repeat the question? Sorry.
What experience do you believe you possess that demonstrates your ability to relate to a cross-section of the public that might come before you?
Right. So I'm born, bred in the Bronx, raised by the Department of Corrections. There isn't a person in Bronx County or in the city of New York from whatever walks of life that I haven't been exposed to, talked to, represented, defended, right? Sought justice, marched for justice. So, you know, I'm as New York can get. I'm as Bronx can get. And I've been on a march for justice for a very, very, very long time. The beauty of this, and I'm asking the voter to think about that. For someone to offend societal norms, rejoin society, to then become a lawyer, and now vying to be judge, only in America is that possible. The audacity of hope, the audacity that I would think that I had the ability to do that. And then the electorate to actually make that decision. So look, I'm uniquely qualified only because of 20 some odd years that I've been doing criminal justice reform, the mentoring that I've done, whether through Thurgood Marshall mentoring program, whether it's been the pro bono cases that I've done, whether it's been ballot access cases or the criminal justice post-conviction matters that I've taken on pro bono. In the end, I believe that when elected, I'm gonna make Bronx County very proud. Thank you.
Ms. Flores?
Okay, great. So your question is demonstrating cross sections, right? Perfect. So I just wanted to make sure I got that right. I, first and foremost, have been living in the Bronx since the late 90s. I lived in different areas of the Bronx. So I've been able to mix around different, you know, heritage. I don't know what the right word is to say, right? So different cultures or heritage that come about the different areas of the Bronx and what makes us so unique, right? So I'm married to a New Yorker. And again, you know, I have the ability to understand a lot of issues that certain folks don't have. I have the ability to know what it is to deal with someone who has a mental illness. I have the ability to understand someone who's a police officer, someone who in my family is Black, someone from, you know, whether it be the North Bronx, the East Bronx, the South Bronx. These are all the cross sections. And these are things that I, you know, understand and bring forward.
Yep, Ms. Gonzalez-Taylor.
Yeah.
Well, what a lot of people don't know, and I just came out to my creative family, is that I'm a poet and a writer. I write children's books, which is something that is not too common to attorneys. Lawyering can be somewhat dry and boring. I found poetry when I left prosecution. After I became a hearing officer, I started going to poetry open mics and workshops so that I could use poetry as a way of healing past trauma. And that gives me, that has allowed me to meet so many people in the community that I would have never met if I had stayed at the DA's office. Being a prosecutor is very insular. Being a judge is very insular as well, right? And I know that there are limits once I put on that robe that I'm gonna have to kind of shut doors and windows to a certain extent. But being a poet has allowed me access to a community of people that I might not have gotten to know. That allows for some cross-section. Military travel. I've met people that have lived everywhere in this nation, from California to Kentucky to Missouri. Mentoring Monroe students. Mentoring students since 2011, first with ASA, a proprietary college, and then my Monroe students here. I meet students that come at all levels, students that I have to help to recover from some of the deficiencies that the system has provided them. Those allow me to relate to people. Being the mother of 3 Black women, 2 young adult women and 1 teenage daughter. My life is different today because I married a Black man. I don't think that I would have seen the world the same if I had married a Puerto Rican man, because we cannot deny that even in our own culture, there is a certain level of colorism and racism that exists that a lot of us wish to kind of hide. What they say, no escondo el sol con la mano, and I make believe that there is no racism in the Puerto Rican community. That is not the truth. Having married someone who could be subject to hurt in the street based on past behavior that we've seen, I have a different perspective. And just living here my entire life. Being the daughter of a mail lady and a metal polisher. I saw my mom worked 13-hour days every day, almost 7 days a week. She knew, because she's passed on now, but she knew everybody in Harlem from the years of delivering mail. And that experience transpired to me as well. She used to take me to the swing room and I would hang out with all the mailmen and the mail ladies. And I have 30 seconds left. So just living, being a human being and living in this county, which is it's so beautiful. It's not just Latino. It's not just African-American. We have West Africans, right? The member of that diaspora. We have Yemeni, we have Muslims, we have Buddhists, we have a Filipino community. We tend to kind of focus only on the majority Latino community, but we are a mosaic of people here too.
Next is Ms. Powell.
I really think my ability to be able to relate to the people of the Bronx is based on the fact that I'm originally from the Midwest. I'm a 6th generation Missourian. I had the opportunity to go to graduate school in Boston. So I had a chance to experience New England And then I've been here in the mid-Atlantic states, New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut area for over 30 years. I think that my background, my family, my upbringing, where basically we were just taught to respect everyone. You know, pretty much every particular belief, religion, and the like talks about treating other people how you want to be treated. And that was the rule in my household. That was the rule in my life. That's actually the rule with my friends. I have the type of friends, if one of us says something that seems to be stupid or something else, our friends will actually point us out and call us on the carpet for it. My experience being a prosecutor in the Bronx, dealing with individuals who have been accused of crime, as well as people who have been victims of crime, has made me open-minded in reference to what is possible and what can actually be done to help individuals. My life being a criminal defense attorney has exposed me to more individuals and more situations. And it runs the gamut. I've represented everyone in court, from a Hasidim Jew in Manhattan to a West African in Brooklyn to an American Black in Queens to Asians of different ethnicities as everything else. I really think the ability is, it's just based on how you were raised. You know, the fact that I'm a Black woman, I'm not gonna harp on it, but I mean, it's apparent when you see me. So I really hope and think that that is gonna come in, it's gonna factor into how I treat other individuals, based on the fact that I am a Black woman, I am from another part of the country. People in New York make fun of my accent because I'm the person who sounds different here. So yes, I know that I can represent people. And then to go slightly further, you know, I'm a Lutheran. The church that I attend, we have everything. We have West Indian Black, we have Guyanese. Our pastor is Puerto Rican. How many people know Puerto Rican Lutherans? Okay, we still have whites because our church was originally German and Swedish in this part of the Bronx. Our congregation has everything. We basically are what America's supposed to be, what the United Nations looks like. So I know I can interact with everyone. I know I can represent everyone. And basically, I want to do my community proud. I want to do my family proud. I want to do my profession proud. And just one little thing, again, as Ms. Flores said, the courts have been fully in operation, especially the criminal courts, which is still running 24/7, 365. And there came a point in time during the pandemic to make sure that people did see a judge, that there was still, they even brought back the 1 a.m. to 9 a.m. arraignment shifts. Because as I said, I have 700 attorneys between Bronx and Manhattan who represent the people of the Bronx 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. And yes, there are things that are being done to deal with the pandemic and everything else. Thank you, Ms. Davids.
Thank you. Moving on to our next question. I do believe we have now left the general and we are moving on to the housing portion of our questions. So we will be beginning with you, Ms. Powell.
Yes.
And growing up, did your family rent or own your house? And have you ever or been or experienced closely homelessness?
My family has rented and owned homes. As I stated, I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. It's a little bit different there. Even though there is public housing, it is not as common because you have more land, you have more real estate, you have more housing. My family was fortunate enough to buy our first home. Okay, I guess it makes no difference in reference to age. Back in 1971. My family has been homeowners since that point in time. When I first came to New York, I rented. I was fortunate enough, my husband and I, to buy a place here in the Bronx 15 years ago. I have not had the experience with homelessness. I have been blessed in that aspect.
Thank you. Next would be Ms. Gonzalez-Taylor.
Yes, I got as close as having to go to court back when housing court was housed on 851 Grand Concourse. I went with my mom to help her. We would be served several times with what they used to call dispossess. That's how Puerto Ricans called it back then. They would put it on the door and it'd be the most embarrassing thing in the world. The whole neighborhood would know that you hadn't paid your rent. I have not, thankfully, not gotten to the point of being homeless, but I've had experiences having to run away with my mother for domestic violence incidents and my little brother at the time, who we would have to keep a go bag. Well, we tell domestic violence victims to keep a go bag so that they can run. We did that several times where we ran with nothing, including one time when we ran to Florida with nothing. We didn't run to Florida. We flew, someone paid for us to get to Florida. So even though I haven't had the homelessness experience where I've had to be in a shelter, I've had the experience of having been insecure and not being able to be in my home and feel safe. I am a renter. I'm an owner of my own home. I was able and blessed to be able to purchase my own home with my husband in 2009 in the Pelham Gardens section of the Bronx. Before that, we moved several times. We lived in Soundview, at Metcalf. We lived in Schleierville. We lived in Throgs Neck, and we lived on Harrison Avenue while I was on law school in Burnside. I myself lived in several buildings growing up. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Flores?
So I have never experienced homelessness. My family has both rented and owned. My mother came to this country with what she had on and my then 18-month-old sister by her side, no money, and dependent on her family to provide her and get her on her feet. She did that. She got her education here. She became a public school teacher. She retired as a public school bilingual teacher out of Newark, New Jersey. And as did my father. When they got married, they were able to put their funds together and purchase their first home. As an adult, I rented. I rented in the Bronx and I have owned in the Bronx. I bought my first home in the Bronx in 2003 in Shore Haven. I wasn't able to move in until 2006 because that's when Shore Haven was doing their phase 2 construction. That's where my son was born. And so I left Morris Park where I was renting and moved into Shore Haven. And since then I lived in different places. I've lived in Parkchester, rented in Parkchester and in the Grand Concourse area.
Thank you. And next, Mr. Cruz.
Very quickly. So I was born in the Bronx to Puerto Rican parents, raised in the shadows of the Kingsbridge Armory. I went to PS 86, 143, John F. Kennedy High School. My family, I was raised by a single mother. My family has always struggled. Homelessness was part of that struggle. It was part of that identity growing up, right? It was never easy, but it gave me a certain perspective in life as to the importance of housing and how that is so rooted in generational wealth and moving forward and providing for our kids in a way in which it's consistent for them to grow and develop, right? So the housing is such an essential part of that. And so I was fortunate. My wife and I married 25 years ago, and we bought our house 20 years ago, right? And we set down roots here in Bronx County. This is the first time I ever owned anything, right? So blessed, quadruply blessed, right? Raised our 3 children. And so now I'm informed by these experiences in such a way where someone tells me, oh, Mr. Cruz, can you help me? I need representation. And housing court is not something I like, but I do it only because I know the need is such. The march for justice, whether in the criminal term, whether in the civil term, whether in the housing court, is still a march. People need our services, they need representation. And as a judge, right? They need to make sure that the justice that they receive is complete, it's timely, and something that's consistent with the ethos of our community, right? I often tell people, right, an election of a judge is actually the election of the ethos of the community. And ultimately, when that judge is elected, he brings those values into the courtroom to dispense justice one case at a time, right? So I'm optimistic of a bright future, of a long discourse we're going to have about the delivery of justice post-COVID and what a judge today is going to have to do as opposed to the judges that we had in the past. I've had the benefit of being trained by one of the most, a pioneer, if you will. I got you, I'm talking too long, but I just tell you this. Having had that experience as a court attorney, having had that experience as a litigator, having had that experience as someone who stood before the bench, it's not easy. And ultimately, I come from struggle. I need the electorate to know that. And ultimately, a vote for Cruz is a vote for change. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
All right, next question. Since civil court cases cover a wide variety of situations, including housing evictions and foreclosures, when last were you in a NYCHA development? We'll go in alphabetical order. Mr. Cruz?
Say that again?
Since civil court cases cover a wide variety of situations, including housing evictions and foreclosures, when last were you in a NYCHA development?
Today, serving process on an election law matter. Clearly, there is, having been born and raised in the Bronx, I've been in NYCHA developments when I was collecting signatures. I'm in the NYCHA developments all of the time. I have an office on 161st, and Millback houses isn't far. So with regards to housing, I think the civil court will get the commercial end of that eviction. The housing court will get the eviction element of that, if that makes any sense. Anyway, hopefully I answered your question.
Ms. Flores?
All right, so your question is, when was the last time I was physically in a NYCHA facility?
Yes.
I have to say 2014, I believe, was the last time I walked into one, and that was because I had to represent a child, and the child was being taken care of by his grandmother, and the grandmother could not bring the child to me or to my office for an interview, so I went to them. I sat in their living room. They showed me around their apartment and how they lived, and sadly enough, I noticed when I went to the apartment door that the locks were not working. And that was upsetting. And I asked the grandmother why the locks were not working. And she told me that on numerous occasions, they have tried to break into her apartment. And nonetheless, I went in, I sat down on her couches, which didn't have anything but the styrofoam underneath the fabrics. She had her clothes hanging, and I could do nothing other than offer her help. Ask her what she needed, what can I do, how can I help you? Other than my purpose there, which was to interview the child, I got that done, I accomplished that. But that's what I'm about. I'm about helping people. When I see someone that is in need and in a desperate need, that she was an elderly woman trying to do what's best to help her grandchild grow up in the projects, I wanted to help her in any which way I can. And as a private attorney, as an 18B attorney, first and foremost, we don't make much money, right? So, but with the little money that I had, I offered her whatever I had in my wallet at the time. I continue to do that. Today, actually, we went out and we served food through New York Common Pantry, serving those that don't have to eat, that have suffered through the pandemic. They were suffering before, and the pandemic just made things even harder for them. So I continue, my service. I see. All right, thank you.
Ms. Gonzalez-Taylor.
Hi, thank you. Yes, the last time I was at a NYCHA facility, a NYCHA building, I don't want to call it a facility because I think that language matters in how we're referring to our housing systems. We need to re-envision a new criminal justice system and a system of justice where we call people by what they are, which is human beings. And we talk about places of housing, such as housing developments and not facilities. Facilities creates a connotation that we're treating people for less than what they deserve. The last time I was in a housing development was at the Melrose houses canvassing. I have been visiting often because I had to collect over 1,400 signatures just to avoid a challenge from either my opponents or anyone else. Something that is commonly done in election. Thankfully, no one challenged anybody's petitions in light of what's happening with our situation. So that was great. And I appreciate that, as I didn't plan on challenging anybody either. What I'm learning visiting the New York City Housing Authority residents is that they have never seen a judge candidate knock on their door. And I met over 3,000 people in 3 or 4 weeks, through the 2.5 weeks that we were trying to collect all these signatures. They said, I've never seen anyone knock on my door that's a lawyer telling me that they want to run for judge. This is different this year because there are 5 candidates, one of which is not here. And that's why people are, approaching New York City Housing to canvass. But I do have I have family that lives in New York City Housing Authority. The last time I have not visited my aunt who lives on 180th. It's been some time, but I do have family members who live in New York City Housing.
I have not been in New York City public housing lately, even though I don't work for OCA. In my current position, I cannot practice. And also based on my current position at the moment, I have not been politicking in the streets. So that's the reason I haven't been knocking on doors or anything else. I have been to public housing developments as a defense attorney representing clients. When you want to see what happened at the scene of a crime, yes, you're going to send an investigator, but it's always better to be there yourself, to see everything yourself, because you may look for something that your investigator didn't, or that your client may have told you at a later point in time that you want to go to see if the angle was correct, what the lighting was, what the circumstances were in the day in question. So that's my last experience with NYCHA housing.
Thank you. All right, moving on to our next question. We're moving on to our next topic as well. This next topic is going to be law and justice, as general as that sounds. The question is, were you to be elected, what, if anything, can you do to guarantee that there will not be disproportionate sentencing or fining of African-American defendants? Ms. Powell, you're first.
I will try to make this as general as possible.
Yes.
Based on your question. Obviously, well, I don't want to say based on being a woman, I'm based on being Black. I think it would be based on the fact that I'm fair. I would not be partial to one side or the other. I'm going to take a person's circumstances into consideration. That's the circumstances of the alleged crime, as well as the circumstances of the alleged perpetrator. Should there be a situation where the prosecution has met his or her burden beyond a reasonable doubt, then and only then is a judge in a position to consider sentencing on any particular matter. One thing that I think can be done a little bit more so in the state courts, which are done in each and every case in federal court, where I've also had the opportunity to practice, is to make sure you have detailed background reports on your client. In federal court, it's called pre-sentencing, but the group that does the pre-sentencing investigations in federal court do a very detailed investigation of a person, not just their criminal history, but they look into their social history. They look into sometimes even the psychosocial history, as well as their medical history. you want to take all those things into consideration. You also want to take into consideration what, let's say, some offenses you really don't have any say in. So I'll give you an example. If a person is actually convicted of a violent felony offense, certain things are taken out of the judge's hands under the law. There's nothing that an individual judge can do to change that. But what a judge can do is, even within the parameters of that sentencing, that sentencing guideline, for lack of a better term, you can, if you believe that the person deserves the opportunity, you make sure that they have that opportunity. And you make sure that regardless of the person's ethnicity, race, sexual orientation, or anything else, that you're going to base your decision on the crime that was allegedly committed, as well as the circumstances of the person. And obviously, and not treating one group less than any other group.
Thank you. Ms. Gonzalez-Taylor?
Thank you. So professionally, right, as a judge, you have to be aware of the outcomes that you are producing in your case. You have data that you can look back on to make sure that you are being fair across the board, that you're being neutral, and that you are applying the law the way that it is supposed to be applied, and checking that implicit bias that every single human being is capable of having. You are not free of past experiences and things in the back of your mind that are frames of references when you are living life. Split-second decisions that when you double check, you can realize you're making a mistake. It takes special understanding and awareness to check your bias, whether you are of any ethnicity or any background. Be aware of outcomes, and also professionally be part of associations that advance fairness in the system, racial justice, either through monetary donations to associations that advance racial justice, and be part of studies that are being conducted. If you're offered an opportunity to be a jurist participant in outcomes, submit yourself to training on checking your bias. That is something that is available to current court attorneys, court employees, as well as judicial staff. That's what I would do. Just really double check and make sure that I'm applying the law fairly across the board, no matter who comes before me. That is when lived experience comes into place. The fact that $5 for you might mean $500 in proportion to someone who's working a minimum wage job. Someone sometimes with a background that hasn't really had that struggle or realized how hard it is to earn, $15 an hour at this point, may not have that understanding when they're passing a fine. So that is something that, regardless of your background, you should be aware of as a jurist. Check that and make sure that the salary that a judge is making is astronomical compared to the people that are coming before them. So it is important to keep that in mind.
Thank you. Ms. Flores?
So how do you stop the disproportion, right? And it's not just a disproportion in sentencing and fining, it's disproportion throughout the entire court system. Recently, there was a commission which was run by Mr. Johnson, Jay Johnson, who reported that there is a vast amount of disproportion within our court system. So taking, for example, the Bronx population, Bronx has almost 85% of non-whites. That is the Bronx, what makes up the Bronx population. However, only 57% of the jurists on the bench are of equal proportion. So where is the equality? It's not there. Statewide, appointed judges, 61% are white. Elected judges, even though our elected judges, we think, at least in the Bronx, the numbers are great, but it's still statewide, 52% are still white. In New York City Family Court, more than half of the litigants are of color, yet less than half of the jurists are still white. So how do you fix that problem? You put someone on the bench like me, a female of color. That's how you fix disproportion. A female of color who will then look at the facts take everything, all the evidence into consideration. I have knowledge of the law. I'm fair and impartial, and that's how you stop disproportion. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Cruz.
I'm going to be very short, right? So electing Angel Cruz for judge is electing blind justice. The type of justice that I'm going to dispense will not consider gender, race, creed, none of those qualifications, if you will. You know, we talk about filling the gap in the inequities from the bench, right? And part of what you asked about was about criminal justice sentences and the imposition of that, right? I'm very careful as to what I say on that topic because it's very close to me. I know what it is, a criminal sanction, right? But again, justice is blind, and that's all we want of our judges. We want a judge to have the opportunity to allow the litigants to practice their craft, put their facts before us, and ultimately call it as we see it without bias or favor. And that's what you get when you vote Cruz for judge. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next question. How would you define judicial activism, and do you believe you'd be a judicial activist on any subject? Which order are we going in?
You're going to start with Cruz.
All right, Mr. Cruz.
Judicial activism is something that we hear in law school. I'm still grappling with that definition. I think a judge who's independent and brings his scholarship with him will open the book, see what the law says, apply the facts, and dispense justice without bias or favor, right? So that's what you'll get ultimately, and that's what I'm advocating. Thank you.
Ms. Flores?
So fairness is key. That's first and foremost in everything that I set forth. As a judge, we are bound to follow the Constitution and follow the law. However, we are humans. I'm human. I'm a mother. I bring to the bench life experiences, and we can't put those experiences to the side. I'm obligated to follow the law. However, the law changes with time, and times change. We can't, as individuals, go blind to what's going on in the world, right? So in my perspective, the laws don't have to be overturned by a trial judge. They can be adjusted to reflect the times. And certainly many judges have done that. It's by circumstance. When you have a case before you, you don't always have a case where you're gonna have judicial activism, but sometimes the case that comes before you requires you to change the law and call upon the legislature to change the law because times have changed, right? So the best example I can think of at the moment are the 18Bs, right? So, and my judge changed the rate for the 18B. He saw that $40 to $25, whatever it was back in the day, was not correct. He felt that needed to go up. These are hardworking attorneys that are working for low pay per hour of $25 to $40, whatever it was. He thought that an attorney should be getting paid at the equivalent of the federals. So the federal attorney and the federal bar. He told the legislature, this has to change. This can't go on anymore. And in fact, legislature, you need to do this. And guess what? It changed. It wasn't the amount that he suggested, but the legislator very quickly came back and changed that amount. That's a sign of judicial activism when you need to change the law because of times. Thank you.
All right, Gonzales-Taylor.
Yes, thank you. Hi, I find activist judges to be judges who can make courageous decisions. judges who can look at what's happening before them, consider the facts that are being presented, compare those facts to the law and what is allowed, and using those law, like Ms. Flores said, the law and the cases and everything that is before them in order to affect positive change in the community. Activist judges are judges that stand up to political influence. They stand up to what we are now calling cancel culture. Your next judges have to be courageous judges who can make decisions without having to worry about being crucified on Twitter or Facebook or anywhere else. That is something that is opening up, especially now that we have these means of communications. But we are, like Ms. Flores says, the first thing we do is to swear to uphold the Constitution. We have to base everything we do from that groundwork. Procedural due process. Those are the things that we have to look out for. So activist judges, it's a dangerous term because we are married to the Constitution. We're guardians of the Constitution first. And if we're able to affect change within the parameters of that Constitution, it's a breathing document. It's done on purpose so that we can grow with the times as we grow as human beings and evolve intellectually and academically. That's what I would say an activist judge is, one who's not afraid of making courageous choices and dangerous choices, but not anything that you would be afraid of political backlash or popular backlash by the people that are not happy with your decisions.
Thank you. And Ms. Powell?
I think judges who decide, make the right decision, I don't consider that being activism. I consider that to me to be the least that you can do, because whether you're put into this position for 10 years, 14 years, or if it's federal court, you're put into the position for life, whatever time, whatever your tenure is on the bench, you're there to serve the people. Yes, you take the Constitution into consideration, but remember when the Constitution was written, and yes, it is a living document, but when that Constitution was written, I wasn't a citizen. In fact, no one on this call was a citizen. Not to mention, I was even less than, I was only considered 3/5 of an individual. So yes, the Constitution can be taken into consideration. And yes, the legislature can be approached about making changes. And in fact, they haven't changed the 18B rate since the early 2000s. So basically, if any of us are elected, that needs to be brought up again, because you have people who give their blood, sweat, and tears to represent people. And unless you're carrying an ungodly caseload, you're not going to be able to represent your family. But getting back to activism, to me, it's doing the right thing. I don't consider that being progressive. I don't consider that being radical. I consider that to living up to what your position is as a judge and what you should do in representing the people, in this case, of the Bronx.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Moving on to our next question. I see we have 15 minutes left in our program. So we only have 2 questions left, so we might run over to 9:05 if that is okay with everyone, and then we'll do our closing remarks. But the second to last question is going to be, can you explain your own judicial philosophy in layman's terms? So for the commoner. And we're going to start with Ms. Powell.
Well, in layman's terms, my judicial philosophy is doing the right thing. I know that may seem really simple and may sound like just a catchphrase, but it's very important. You need to look at all the facts. You need to consider all the circumstances before coming to a conclusion. So you cannot jump to a conclusion based on what the alleged offense is, whether it's that alleged offense is committing what is called a crime, or not paying child support, or not paying your rent on time. You have to take everything into consideration. You have to look at all the facts and the circumstances. You have to listen to both sides. You have to be open-minded and not coming to a decision until you have all the facts in front of you. And then when you come to the decision, you have to follow the law, but at the same time, you must take individuals into consideration, because the law is something that is to be used by the people, and it's not something that's supposed to be used to beat down the people of the Bronx or any other place.
Thank you, Ms. Gonzalez-Taylor.
Yes, my judicial philosophy is one of procedural justice, which calls for transparency. It calls for people to understand what is happening in every case. And this applies whether I go to civil court, family court, or criminal court. That means that people in my courtroom, myself as the judge, the court attorneys, the clerks, the court officers are treating everyone with respect. They're speaking to people in kind terms. They're not using dehumanizing terms like perp or body. Making sure that resources are used to look at everything judicially to make sure that we understand the case, offering people respect and compassion, and setting the tone. The judge is the leader in the courtroom. If you don't respect the people that are coming before you and you're speaking down to them and acting like they're not human beings, your staff is likely to follow suit and do the same thing. So mine is a philosophy of compassion, kindness, and respect. And that's what people will expect if they elect me to be their next judge in the Bronx.
Thank you, Ms. Flores.
So my judge starts every summary jury trial with telling everyone that a case is about four-letter word. And that four-letter word starts with F. And that four-letter word is fair. F-A-I-R, fair. That's what you need to be. That's what every judge needs to be. That's what needs to be applied in every case. That is my philosophy. I've said it over and over again this evening that fairness is key. I've been taught that. I will practice that. That is who I am. In addition, respect. Respect to the litigants, respect to your colleagues, respect time. Every litigant that comes before you wants to be heard. Every litigant that comes before you is unique. And I want to be able to let them speak their story, give them that respect, give them that time, give them that moment in court. That's what's important. Respect all around, respect the attorneys, respect each other. Those are my philosophies, fairness and respect. Thank you.
Thank you, and Angel Cruz.
Yes, respect, honesty, dispensing justice speedily, respecting all of the people that participate in that process when we're marching for justice, right? So in the end, I know that as a judge, it's important to allow the litigant his day in court. It's important to hear all of the facts. And then I pledge that I'm going to call it as I see it, as the law dictates, funneled by my own experience and my interpretation of the law. So ultimately, fairness. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, our next question and last question. How do you define injustice, and what do you perceive as the greatest obstacles to justice in 2021? Mr. Cruz.
The greatest obstacles to justice in 2021 are ultimately at the bench and the bar, right? So we want to make sure that the attorneys that are being provided by the government ultimately live up to their obligation to ensure that they're providing an adequate defense, right? So money ultimately is going to be the big factor there in the type of justice that we acquire in Bronx County, because we need litigants to be properly represented, right? Technology, right, is going to be a problem. As we move forward, we need to update our laws and update our technology to dispense justice consistent with the needs of our community. So that primarily is what I believe is going to impede how we get justice. And ultimately, you know, the technology for the defendants, those who are charged with crimes should be given all of what's necessary to provide an adequate defense. So if we're pledging justice, if we're pledging fairness, if we're advocating for compassion, if we're advocating for a lived experience, then we're also looking to our legislator to make sure that we have the adequate resources that the judges need to dispense justice without bias in favor. So ultimately, haven't been a court attorney, haven't been a litigant, haven't been a practitioner, haven't been on a march for justice for a very long time. I can tell you that a vote for Cruz is a vote for change. So thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Flores posted in the chat that she had to step away. So if she gets back before we finish this round of the last question, we will get back to her. So we're going to move on to Ms. Gonzalez-Taylor.
Oh, injustice is really in the eye of the beholder. As jurists, we've made decisions that are, as a hearing officer, I've made decisions that are tough. I've made decisions where I had to call out a colleague who misrepresented herself on the record, and I had to write a decision making sure that that person was, not necessarily made an example of, but to provide an understanding that procedural fairness is fair across the board, whether you are a student, a teacher, or an employee of the DOE in an administrative capacity. So injustice is really in the eye of the beholder. Most of the time, judges make decisions. Someone's always going to walk away thinking that they were done in injustice. And it can be as small as a sanitation worker giving a daycare person $3,000 worth of tickets because they didn't know that they were not supposed to post a sticker in a post throughout Bedford Park, which is what happened to a friend of mine that I helped pro bono at the health department at a hearing a long time ago. Or it can be as bad as horrible and as tragic as what happened to Khalid Browder, a person who's from Burnside Avenue, where I grew up, who sat in jail and languished for 3 years without being heard, and sat there, and his case was heard over and over again, and no one ever, he wasn't given the attention that he deserved under our Constitution and our country. So it is really in the eye of the person itself that is experiencing that injustice. And sometimes it's obvious as what we know and we see, right? Such as Khalid Browder and what happened to Mr. Floyd last summer. Obstacles to justice are many. One that I foresee and that I've observed personally as a professional is sometimes there is close-mindedness to change. There is a pushback on restorative circles and restorative justice practice in the criminal justice system. People are resistant to believing that we can do healing circles with offenders, that we can bring people together in a room and have mediation done so that they can restore each other, so that a harmer, a person who did harm, can restore the person who was harmed. As long as we have that closed-mindedness in our system, things may not change as quickly as we would like them to change. Access to court technology is also an issue. Not everyone has teams. The court is working, I'll acknowledge that, but physical court, if I'm mistaken, is not completely open 100%. So defendants, people who are incarcerated, people who are facing cases don't necessarily have the technology that we all are privileged with having to be able to have this intellectual conversation tonight. That is something that is an obstacle to justice in the future and currently. Money to be able to run our system. It is an expensive thing to do. The criminal justice system is one of the most expensive systems to run. I think it's about $30 billion a year. If I'm $300 billion a year in the nation that are spent in criminal justice spending. So that's what I have.
Thank you. And next, Ms. Powell.
Basically, I define justice as inclusion. And basically, in reference to inclusion, I mean ethnicities, race, sexual orientation, everything else, everyone having a seat at the table. Okay, I'm sorry, just want to make sure. I believe in having a level playing field. And by that, I don't necessarily mean equality, I mean equity. Because I'm quite sure all of you have seen that one little cartoon where you have 3 kids trying to look over a fence. One is tall, one is medium height, and one is very small. If you have equality, you're giving each person the exact same thing, which keeps each person exactly the same status that they are now. Whereas if you have equity, you're basically going to put everyone on an equal footing. And that's one of the things you definitely need in the courthouse. Obviously, as everyone else has said, you need the money, you need the resources. I see that with the attorneys I work with. Sometimes there's situations where the powers that be don't want to sign off in reference to the assignment of experts. And there may be some unique esoteric area that the common man, whether it be the common attorney or the common juror in the box, may not understand. We need technology. Recently there were stories in Politico and a few other newspapers about NYPD taking the phones of a lot of young people and not returning that property to them. And as we know through the pandemic, not everyone is fortunate enough to have a computer or two at their home or a tablet. And a lot of these children have been taking their lessons over their telephones, which have been confiscated by NYPD. Also time. One of the things I have noticed during the pandemic, I attend approximately 5 to 7 meetings a week with administrative judges in Manhattan as well as in the Bronx. And even though we have the opportunity to set aside that 1 hour for each of those meetings per week, in the courtrooms, they're still trying to rush things through. What is happening now with the courts are reopening, as was mentioned before, there's a backlog in the criminal courts. So, and also there's pushback from individuals who need to come to court, be they the litigant, be they the attorneys, or be they other parties. So one of the things that has to be done is there has to be more time. There actually needs to be more individuals on the bench in Bronx County and other counties to make sure that people have their day in court, that people have their say, and it's not just a numbers game. One of the things that really disappointed me in these meetings, we talk about everything except justice. We talk about reopening. We talk about how many cases we think we can do a day. We talk about, can you get this done or get that done? But justice is never a topic. So as I said, to me, justice defined is inclusion.
No, but the thing is this,
Justice defined is equity.
Thank you so much. And that concludes our questions for this evening's forum. So I would just like to thank all of the candidates for participating this evening, for joining us, for answering our questions, and helping the populace get to know you and educate themselves so that they feel ready, prepared, and comfortable when they see your names on the ballots. Before we end, every candidate is going to have 1 minute to give their closing remarks. Just simply state why Bronxites should vote for you now that we've spent the past 2 hours getting to know you. And we will do that. Let's see, we did the candidate introductions in alphabetical, so let's do the closing remarks reverse alphabetical. So Ms. Powell.
Let me unmute again. Again, thank you very much for hosting this forum. This is a learning experience for all of us. And I appreciate the time and the effort that you went through to make sure that the people of the Bronx of New York were aware of the individuals who are coming before them on the ballot who are seeking to be on the bench. In reference to me personally, simply put, I know I can do the job. Again, that may seem to be a little flippant, but the thing is, I have the experience. I've worked in the Bronx most of my career. I've lived in the Bronx now for the past 15 years. I know if I'm selected as a judge this fall, and hopefully am successful in the primary, that I will represent the best of the Bronx. I will be fair. I will be open. I will make sure that everyone is heard, all of the litigants, and I will take the job seriously. Thank you.
Thank you. It seems as though Ms. Flores has yet to rejoin us, so we'll be moving on to,
Right back, sorry, I didn't turn my camera on even though I came back. Thank you very much for this opportunity. It was a great evening. I wish the Bronx community would vote for me. I definitely have all the educational experiences that would make a great judge. I've worked in family court, Supreme Court, small claims arbitrator, a hostos professor. I'm volunteering in the community. I have lived experiences. I'm a mother of a special needs child. I have a stepson who is NYPD. I have a child who's biracial, a stepchild who's biracial, and I'm first generation in this country. So I understand the plight that everyone who comes to this country, who's coming to our court system, and doesn't understand how to navigate this system. I get them. I understand them. I've been in their shoes. I've been on the other side. I've navigated the system for my parents as immigrants to this country, and I will approach every case with respect and with fairness, every litigant with fairness and with respect. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Gonzalez.
Pleasure meeting Ms. Powell and seeing all my other colleagues, Yadhira and Angel.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Davis, and thank you, Ms. Davis, and thank you, Mr. Ullah, and my colleagues in the bar for joining us tonight. We started off our conversation about how this is not really done because it may not be so judicial, but this happens in every small town in America. This happens across America in small towns. Judges literally go and do like corn dog judging while they're running for office. And the reason why they do that is because people care about who they have to see when they get a traffic ticket, who they have to see when they get arrested, because they want to know who they have to see if they're getting a divorce or anything else that it requires the conflict being resolved by a human being at a bench. The difference is, who knows, like me having been grown up in the Bronx, going back to the beginning of our conversation about the hot summer and the fire hydrant and having to cool off in the summer, and that's all you have because you don't have the clubhouse or anything else. The difference between me and other people might be that I know the difference between obstruction of governmental administration because you obstructed an investigation versus you being charged by a police officer for running a fire hydrant because it was his time to do some overtime. I had cases like that at the DA's office that I readily disagreed with and dismissed at the complaint room. So lived experience boils down to that minutia, which is at the bench at arraignments, the judge who's gonna call the BS. That is me. Vote for Gonzales-Taylor. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least, Mr. Cruz.
Oh, wow. Criminal justice reform. It's going to be on the ballot this year. Criminal justice reform is about providing transformative change, right? Providing concrete examples of restorative justice to inspire the next generation to take hold of their government and create that space where those returning citizens could, live the full measure of their citizenship, right? So what we're talking about here is an election of a judge who ultimately will dispense justice without bias or favor and is running to promote what is the best of our system, right? How can someone come from public enemy to public champion, right? How is that possible? Only in America is it possible. Right? So I'm running for all the right reasons. I'm running to promote the good in our system. I'm running to promote the change that we need, right? So a vote for Cruz is a vote for transformative change, and I urge the electorate to exercise that franchise in a way that they're going to see it come June. So thank you. Cruz for judge. Good night.
Thank you. All right, we have just heard the closing remarks from all of our candidates. And now we'll do closing remarks from our forum hosts.
All right. Thank you so much to all the candidates for allowing us to have such an enriching conversation regarding what's at stake in our 2021 judicial elections. As we've mentioned earlier, and as some of our candidates have mentioned as well, there tends to be such little time and attention dedicated towards judicial elections and educating the public at large regarding the stakes of these elections. Personally, as someone who's worked in politics and studied politics for the past 5 years, this isn't my strongest suit either, but I'm glad that I myself, as well as our, co-hosts and everyone that's been involved, they've been able to educate themselves a little better in regards to our judicial processes and judicial elections. And now we will get a statement from one of our event sponsors, Mohammed Marda.
Ooh, you are muted, sir.
Thank you, Mymoena, for reminding me. I just want to thank you guys for doing an outstanding job hosting this thing. Walli, Ullah, and Mymoena, you guys are awesome. You guys are awesome. I want to thank LittleAfrica BronxNews and of course, Social Impact Strategies for all the work that has been done so far. I want to thank our wonderful guests for this wonderful conversation. There's an emerging community. The African community is really one of the emerging communities in the Bronx. And, civil court judges are probably going to see a lot of cases coming through, within the African community. We are just as normal within the fabric of American society as everybody else. And so we believe that, the African community, we're going to have our issues and we'll probably be filing cases in civil court. And I appreciate everyone saying they're going to be fair and just with all of us. And I like the idea of the, restorative justice. So this has been a wonderful, wonderful conversation. I want to thank all the candidates for participating and letting our community know where they stand on issues. I've always said that, you have to know before you vote. And forums like this, gives us the opportunity to know before we vote. So on that note, I want to thank all of you. Again, my name is Mohammed Marda, and one of the co-sponsors of this beautiful forum. Thank you, everyone, and have a good night. God bless.
Thank you. And lastly, we'll be hearing from Mona.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I just want to say, echo Mohammed Marda's sentiments. Thank you so very much for joining us this evening and participating in this Judicial Candidates Forum. I agree with Mohammed that it's important that voters understand who they're voting for. It's important to know who you're voting for. And just as Mada said, the African community, the West African community, which is the majority here in the Bronx, but there are also South Africans here.
Yay,
as well. But it's, the Bronx is, the Bronx has the largest population of Africans, not just in New York City, but throughout the nation. And this population, this group, this new immigrant group, relatively new immigrant group within the last 20 years is going to continue to grow. And you are going to see us in your capacity as judges and as lawyers. So we just, want you to know that we are here too, and we're getting politically involved, we're getting civically involved, and we look forward to partnerships, working with other communities here in the Bronx. On a separate note, I got fired as timekeeper because I just was not doing a good job. So I will strive to do better next time, I promise, okay? But in my defense, I just want to let people know on Sunday, we are organizing a rally with parents and school safety agents in support of our school safety agents staying in our schools and not eliminating the jobs of over 4,000 Black and brown women, majority Black and brown women. So with the preparations for that, I was just a little bit distracted in my timekeeper duties. So I do apologize, but I will do better next time Walli and Mymoena host a forum. But thank you so very much for joining us this evening. We appreciate you taking the time out to engage our communities and to engage all Bronxites. And last but not least, I want to thank our co-hosts, Walli Ullah and Mymoena Davids, for doing a fantastic job. So.
Thank you for, brainstorming this whole thing.
Well, with that being said, we have closed our closing remarks and our forum is complete. Thank you everyone for joining us here on Zoom and all of the viewers on the Facebook live stream. Thank you for staying with us and hearing what these lovely candidates had to say and their views on various issues and topics. As part of our civic engagement initiative, we will be hosting Meet the Candidate interviews on our website, LittleAfrica Bronx News, and they will also be shared on our Facebook. So please feel free to go to our website to get to hear more from these candidates as we are ramping up to the election. With that being said, I hope everyone has a good evening and everyone stays safe during these times. Good night.
Good night.
Great job, everyone. Good job.